All right, let's just dive right into the massive energy news that's basically shaking the global economy. The United Arab Emirates is officially calling it quits with OPEC and the wider OPEC Plus framework. I mean, this is a monumental breakup. We're talking about removing a core, fundamental pillar from one of the most influential energy groups on the planet. If you follow global markets, you already know this is a huge deal. So in today's Explainer, we're going to break down exactly what this means, why it's actually happening, and most importantly, how it's going to impact you. To understand why this feels like a global earthquake, we're going to cover a major energy breakup, the birth of OPEC controlling global supply, the spare capacity dilemma, shifting geopolitical alliances, and finally, whether we are seeing a broader pattern of exits. All right, Section 1, a major energy breakup. Let's look at the catalyst. The sheer scale of what we're talking about here is just staggering. 4.8 million. That is the United Arab Emirates oil production capacity. Roughly 4.8 million barrels every single day. So yeah, this isn't some minor player quietly bowing out. That kind of output makes the UAE an absolute heavyweight in the market. To put that into perspective, when a producer of this massive size makes an independent move, the ripple effects are going to touch literally every corner of the global economy. We're talking everything from industrial manufacturing all the way down to the cost of your daily commute. So why leave? Well, the Gulf countries stated pretty clearly that their withdrawal, which took effect on May 1st, is so they can focus purely on their national interests. Actually, think about that for a second. They are stepping away from an organization they've contributed to for decades, ever since they joined back in 1967. By prioritizing these national interests, they're signaling a massive pivot toward their own domestic economic diversification. Essentially, they want the total freedom to channel all that immense energy revenue into their own tech sectors, their infrastructure, and an independent future, completely unburdened by a collective group's quotas. Moving to Section 2, the birth of OPEC. Let's dig into the foundations and history. Now, to really grasp what the UAE is walking away from, we have to rewind a bit. Back in the mid-20th century, global oil markets looked completely different. They were totally dominated by this group of powerful Western oil companies, famously known as the Seven Sisters. These monopolies basically held all the cards. They controlled the global production machinery, and they single-handedly set the market prices. Well, as you can imagine, this immense concentration of foreign power didn't sit well, prompting founding oil-producing nations like Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela to band together. Their main goal, to assert sovereignty over their own natural resources, secure fair, stable prices for themselves, and ensure regular supplies to consuming nations. Okay, so this push for sovereignty is what actually led to the Baghdad Conference forming OPEC in 1960. The UAE joins the ranks shortly after in 1967, clearly seeing the immense value in having a unified front. And they operated within this core group for decades, heavily influencing global energy policy. Fast forward to 2016, the expanded OPEC Plus framework is created to bring even more nations into the fold. Then hit 2020, and a major geopolitical shift happens with the signing of the Abraham Accords, which really signaled the UAE's independent diplomatic ambitions. And that brings us right up to the present day, May 1st, when the UAE's monumental exit takes effect. It's really a fascinating journey, going from seeking collective sovereignty to choosing a totally independent path. Which brings us to Section 3, controlling global supply, looking at OPEC versus OPEC+. How does OPEC actually wield its power today? Mostly through one main mechanism, coordinating strict production quotas. And today, this structure is essentially two-tiered. On one hand, you have core OPEC. That's made up of 12 member states acting together to set output limits. But since 2016, those core members have cooperated with Russia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and several other producing nations to form the expanded OPEC Plus alliance. This creates an even larger, much more powerful bloc of coordinated market influence. And let me tell you, their grip on the market is massive. Just the core 12-member OPEC group alone controls roughly 30% of the entire global oil supply. Think about that for a second. That is nearly a third of the world's oil, strictly regulated by agreed-upon output limits. And those limits are designed specifically to keep global energy prices exactly where the organization wants them. But watch what happens when you factor in the extended OPEC Plus framework. Add Russia and those 9 other cooperating nations to the mix, and their collective output control jumps to a massive 41% of the world's supply. It's wild. This kind of leverage is exactly why a single, seemingly administrative decision made by a group of energy ministers in Vienna can instantly change the price you're paying at the gas pump, the cost of global shipping, and even the overarching rate of inflation around the entire world. Moving on to Section 4, the spare capacity dilemma. Basically, pumping versus stabilizing. Now, to really understand the core tension driving the UAE's exit, we've got to talk about a concept called spare capacity. Basically, this is the ability of a nation to rapidly increase its oil output to respond to sudden global supply shocks. And here's the kicker. Alongside Saudi Arabia, the UAE is one of the very, very few members in the entire organization with meaningful room to actually increase its output in an emergency. They literally have the vast reserves and the physical infrastructure primed and ready to go. But having that superpower introduces a massive structural dilemma. Nations with spare capacity must constantly make a really difficult choice. Do they hold back their production to stabilize the market according to OPEC's strict collective quotas? Or do they simply pump more oil to cash out their vast reserves? Ultimately, rather than keeping their highly valuable oil locked in the ground just to adjust the market and benefit the broader organization, the UAE is making a stark economic choice. They want the total freedom to maximize their own financial return immediately. Section 5, shifting geopolitical alliances. This is a fundamental shift. Because, it's not just about the money and the oil quotas. We are also looking at a fundamental shift in Middle Eastern geopolitics and power dynamics. The UAE's highly assertive foreign policy approach has progressively isolated it from fellow OPEC members over time. Specifically, there have been deep, ongoing disagreements with its powerful neighbor, Saudi Arabia. This is particularly true regarding their differing military and political positions on Yemen, as well as a few other regional conflicts. So what are they doing instead? While Abu Dhabi is actively carving out its own distinct sphere of influence across the Middle East and Africa, they are doubling down on their relations with the United States. And, incredibly significantly, they established direct diplomatic ties with Israel through the 2020 Abraham Accords. The UAE views these specific strategic relationships as critical levers for their own independent regional influence. It gives them a unique, direct security channel to Washington, which they consider absolutely vital following recent regional attacks. Ultimately, they're boldly prioritizing these unique national alliances over the collective, unified stance of OPEC. Finally, let's look at Section 6, a pattern of exits. Let's zoom out to the broader trend. While the UAE's departure is a massive, massive headline today, zooming out one final time reveals something super interesting. It's actually part of a much broader historical trend. The UAE is not the first country to walk away, not even close. They're joining a growing list of nations that have recently withdrawn from the organization. We're talking Indonesia, Qatar, Ecuador, Angola, and Gabon. They've all stepped away in recent years. And the primary reason for almost all of them? Fierce disagreements over those very same strict output quotas. The collective rules of the group are just increasingly clashing with distinct individual national interests. So with yet another major heavyweight leaving the cartel to act on its own terms, we really have to ask, are we witnessing the gradual unraveling of the world's most powerful energy alliance? And honestly, if OPEC loses its grip on global supply, what does that mean for the future of your everyday energy prices? It's a monumental shift for sure. So what do you think happens next?